This month's Where'd the Road Go is sponsored by 4 awesome people: Allison Cook, Super-Inframan, Indrid Cold, and 36 Dingo. If you want to become a patron, www.where'dtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And I have with me Mr. Christopher Ernst.
Hey, everybody.
As well as Saxon and Super-Inframan.
Both my personalities at the same time.
Wait, personalities? I thought you were two different people.
Yes, we are.
You just sound exactly the same.
Exactly.
It's like having one person, but both of you talk.
You guys sound exactly the same, and you talk at exactly the same time and say exactly the same thing.
You should hear the echo when we talk inside my head, though. So it's like multiple voices. One of them slightly more robotic than the other.
Bicameral mind man.
Yes.
One of your superpowers.
Yes.
Oh, well, there's a reference that most people aren't going to get.
Oh, yeah. What's
Julian Jaynes wrote that book,
That's right.
Bicameral Mind. I never liked that book. I felt that he was wrong.
I don't think he's correct either, which is essentially the idea. And I'm, it's somebody chime in because I'm trying to gather my thoughts on how to say it. If you remember it better, Seriah.
It's that like people in Greek cultures and stuff going back that far in our history had not developed an inner voice. So they would hear their inner voice and think it was a god or goddess, and that's where all the mythology came from.
Right, but what's the lobe of the brain that was supposedly that's what I was trying to think of.
He was claiming the left and the right brain hadn't fully connected.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's what it was. Yeah,
that's what it was.
Yeah, okay.
I read it.
Yeah, this idea that that's why dumb people in old times, thought
there were
Sky
gods.
was talking to them.
Right. And that's, I think, immediately why I dismissed it, because it's like these people were not stupid. Like, why are you acting like we're light years smarter than people 1,000 years ago or 2,000? I mean, we have a different culture. We've learned things, but individually, I don't know that we're any smarter.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I think that depending on what sort of contexts you're put in, I mean, there was a very particular, like, what are the controls of the space that you're in, what is the environment? I think there's some things that we can extrapolate from how the ecosystems we know work, but humans behave in a different way. So I very much think that there's a lot of possibility for human beings of some sort, even if it wasn't Homo sapien, doing things just as amazing as we do, maybe in a smaller scale. Maybe there wasn't 8 billion of them doing it.
Right. And, they were moving big rocks that we can't move very easily. So.
Right. That was always, when I was in anthropology, the thing that would frustrate me the most is the incongruence of recognizing that people were just as smart and had the same potentials.
Yeah.
At any point through their existence, or, our existence as a species, or even other species like you're talking about, Chris. Because there would be times that would be acknowledged, but then there would be other times where it would be completely disregarded, and it kind of made me crazy. Even with the replication of art and saying well, this pottery style could have only come from this area.
Sure. And
they only used triangles in the designs this way. And I'm like, well, sure, that was probably a popular thing that was done, but to say that was the only way it was done is silly.
Yeah, right. And
it's not really how people work.
I mean, it's only been in the past 100 years, or Industrial Revolution, 120-something years, that we've seen this sort of, I guess, change in the way we engage with a particular type of technology. But we don't think of the sort of natural, sort of as born human mind of 100, 150 years ago as being inferior to ours now.
Right.
And it's essentially the same thing. What situations were they in? How did they react to them? And what things did they invent?
Yep.
What did they come up with and bring up with? Yeah.
So
100%.
So tonight we're going to be doing listener stories I did want to address one thing first, which was a comment someone made, one of the recent shows, regular commentator, and they said they thought it was insulting for us to say things like, well, I know you thought you saw Bigfoot, but... And I wanted to be clear that that is never what we are saying. Like, I believe, like, there have been some really weird listener stories we've had, and other cases we've had. People have seen cartoon characters, things like that. And at no point do I feel like I would want to say to that person, well, that's not really what you saw. No, that is what they saw.
Yeah.
Now, why they saw that is what we're looking at, not debating, you know, whether they saw Bigfoot or saw a UFO. No, they definitely saw that. I believe that. And even if they're lying, I'd rather believe someone who is lying than not believe someone who is telling the truth.
Sure.
Right.
So at no point am I dismissing people's experiences or what they saw. What we're doing, though, is when we're talking about how we perceive things and stuff, is trying to figure out why some of this stuff is so weird. Because if Bigfoot encounters fit the pattern of a flesh and blood creature, you know, if it only appeared very scarcely in areas that it had a large habitat that it could hide in, that would be one thing. But you have it in populated areas where Bigfoot shouldn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So go ahead.
Right. No. I mean, that's something I think about a lot, because you have people that see, you know, Bigfoot in the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, it's you know, not that country is not a big place. And it's like, how would you even have enough habitat to support something like that? So it's, I agree with you. None of this is ever saying that they didn't see these things. It's just speculating on, you know, how did these things occur?
Right.
I remember, you know, I brought up that Sasquatch documentary on, was it Hulu, I think, or something, where the guy was up in the Golden Triangle. But at the end of it, he said something that was kind of, well, you know, Joshua Cutchin really got irked by it, if I remember. He goes, I believe they think they've saw something.
Right.
And it was, you know, just the right level of like condescending and patronizing.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. And none of us are doing that. But I think it's important to draw that distinction of like, I don't think they saw something. I think they saw something.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and I don't know what context the person was replying to.
Neither do I, actually.
Sometimes I know that we've talked about, or something I've talked about, is the idea of whether or not what a person is seeing is in terms of the true nature of the thing as a mask, or a mirror, you know, some sort of like mirror memory or screen memory. And that could be true too, but that's merely like speculation about any of us. I don't know one person, no one researcher, no matter how much they try to convince you. And if they do, stay away from them. They're not a researcher of anything. They're trying to make a buck. If they say that they know what you experienced better than you, that's not a no. Whatever the experience was and what you saw is it. Yes. I mean, that was it, you know, and that's how this phenomena works.
And when, you know, one of the things I like looking at is how our brain perceives things.
Right.
Because we put a lot of trust in it because, well, it is the only thing giving us information about our environment. But it's very fallible. Yeah. And, you know, it fascinates me to realize, it's almost a little scary to realize how fallible it is.
Unless it's not the only thing that's giving us experiences of our environment.
What else would be?
Well, if you adhere to or believe, and this is something that I think about a lot, these ideas of the subtle body or the diamond body or different, you know, so your existence and your consciousness now is actually, you know, it is the functioning of several different sort of types of bodies in the same way that we have our, you know, nervous system and our physical body, and then our muscular system and our cardiovascular system that are all sort of interworking together. You have these other bodies, and that they actually have organs themselves, and that there's the idea that you are along with your physical evolution. There's also lack of a better word, spiritual evolution, where your spirit parts of you, these subtle bodies, are evolving as well, and that is part of the sort of next step of progression for humans.
Yeah.
So some of the things that you're experiencing and seeing are through using, if people are having some anomalous phenomenon experiences, things that they think, maybe ghosts or UFOs or whatever, that you're actually seeing like glimpses or flashes using these essentially spirit organs and seeing part of the intermingling subtle sphere that's sort of interpenetrating ours, but we can't really see it.
Yeah, okay.
And that's the only reason why I point that out is because I think it's an interesting way to think about perception and the limits, I guess, of what we can get from material research or thinking about our consciousness as being limited materially, is if we say, okay, well, maybe it's not just the brain that is impacting how we perceive things. And if that's the case, well, maybe there's some answers that we can't get now, or we're going to have to think about things in an oblique way. That's the only reason I interrupt and mention it.
No, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
But I mean, my goal is generally to find as many ways possible to look at this phenomena.
Yeah.
And I'm somewhat, unlike say Timothy Renner, who has now given up on the flesh and blood Bigfoot, I still leave room for a flesh and blood Bigfoot. Just like there could be extraterrestrials here, I just don't think they comprise the UFO phenomena.
Yeah.
I was highly amused to see that this article going around saying there may be a mothership in our solar system, according to scientists, and I'm like, all right, what's this nonsense? And it was basically them talking about something like Oumuamua could have been what they would expect to see if an alien civilization sent a probe.
Yes.
And that
headline with that drove me crazy.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And everybody jumped on it. You read the article, and that's not what they said.
No, it usually isn't.
I'm scared that it's the mothership's coming because Bootsy Collins is about to die.
Well, now that, on the other hand,
I don't get the reference.
I'm sorry. That's a very specific reference. Bootsy Collins is, and we could talk about Parliament Funkadelic because there's certainly some contactee stuff going on there.
Oh yeah,
but Bootsy Collins was the bass player for Parliament Funkadelic, and he was like very classically this sort of cosmic connection, super psychedelic freak. If anybody remembers from the '90s, the D-Light Groove is in the Heart video. He's the guy that does the rap in the middle, with the bass.
Yeah. But he would sing about like the funk mothership coming down and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I think he was in the bands. Yeah.
Sorry, that was very specific music joke there.
I would be okay if that happened actually.
So,
but no, that was a ridiculous. That article was wasn't really saying that as you were saying. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was just nonsense of an article. So one of my patrons, after we did the AI show, put in MJM put in, following on from Josh's experience, I too have had ChatGPT make up books that don't exist. So I thought I'd ask, tell me about Seriah Azkath's book. And the answer, Seriah Azkath, the host and producer of the podcast Where Did the Road Go, has not yet published a book under his own name. However, he has contributed chapters to several anthologies related to paranormal and alternative history topics. One of the books that featured a chapter by Seriah is Synchronicity, The Art of Coincidence, Choice, and Unlocking the Mind, edited by Kirby Surprise. Seriah's chapter in this book explores the concept of synchronicity and how it relates to his personal experiences in paranormal research. Seriah has also contributed to the anthology UFOs, Reframing the Debate, edited by Robbie Graham. In his chapter, he discusses the challenges and complexities of researching the UFO phenomena and explores some of the alternative explanations that have been proposed for these mysterious sightings. In addition to his written contributions, Seriah has also narrated several audiobooks related to paranormal and alternative history topics, including The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel and The Messengers, Owl Synchronicity and the UFO Abductee by Mike Cleland.
None of this is true, right?
Well, I do host and produce Where Did the Road Go?
That's true. It's funny because that is a book, Synchronicity by Dr. Kirby Surprise.
Right.
Yeah.
So is the Robbie Graham book, Reframing the Debate.
Yeah.
But I was not a part of either. I've never done any audiobooks.
Right.
I've never contributed to any books at this point. I've had blog posts, but I've never. The fact that the ChatGPT came up with all this is just kind of weird.
So, one thing I think out of this is you do need to do some audiobooks at least.
Well, when I get a book done, there will be an audiobook.
Right. And then two, I want to figure out how you get back to edit the Mothman prophecies.
Well, no, that was, I read the audiobook of it. Apparently.
Oh, you read the audiobook of that too? Okay.
Yeah, the audiobook of that and of Mike Clelland's book, which, Mike Clelland did.
So, I mean, you do have a recording studio or music venue in your house there. I mean, I feel like, this is getting back to Josh talking about chat or some of these AIs predicting things to come.
Right. Yeah. Well, I don't think I'm going to be doing the audiobook for Mike since Mike did it himself.
It sounds like one of those things where it's just like it's the pool that it has of data. Yeah, I wonder I feel like it all goes back to that, and that really is what dictates it. So it's looking at you, and then all these other things that it finds have some tangential sort of connection. Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Mike Clelland's been on plenty. He's been on for that book. I've had numerous people on who wrote stuff in reframing the debate. The Kirby one, I have no idea. I've never dealt with that. Didn't even know that was a real book.
Right. Well, that might have been led by the idea of synchronicity. Yeah. So it did, it's using that, and whatever it's searching comes up with that book. Yeah. I don't know. It's so for me, I think it's interesting, but it still has that kind of flavor of like, you're scraping the internet, and that's what's giving this to you. It's not coming from.
And then it's structuring it.
Yeah, and then it's structuring it. I mean, it's still wildly impressive and eerie. Yeah.
All right, so let's get to some listener stories. Which one am I going to start with? I don't. One here, I'm not sure if we've done before, so I'm going to save that one for right now. Let's start with some of Scott's stuff. Scott Farthingworth, Scott Farthingworth, left a couple of stories in comments on YouTube as he was listening to other shows, and some of these were very interesting. He said, on a rainy night at 3 a.m. early last March 2022, we were having a very mild ice storm here. I had been up watching late-night YouTube stuff, probably Where Did the Road Go?, awake at the computer, and I realized I had forgotten to take my garbage out for the morning garbage pickup. The pine tree needles had just been coated in the thinnest coating of ice, but it looked really cool, and it also made for a walk out to the garbage can a bit dangerous, yet it still had that wintry magical feel. It was 3:01 a.m. From the dark basement, I stepped out the side door with my garbage bag into the driveway and literally got blasted in the face with the most overwhelming sulfur smell. It was pure and alarmingly strong. No other smell mixed with it, as it smelled like unburned match tips. Confused, concerned, and investigating, I'm sniffing around and trying to decide if it's a fire or if there's a natural gas leak. And all those questions in my mind are met with no confirmations. I realize that this is just a pure sulfur smell, and as if it were emanating from a heated source. Then a word came to mind: brimstone. Still, I had thought that maybe there was a chemical spill a few miles away on the truck route. Tried to see if it was stronger toward the back or the front of the house. I love being outside at night as it's peaceful and it's all mine with no one around, so I was loving the cool air and slipping around on the ice, but the smell was strong and I knew it probably wasn't going to be good to breathing it in. Then suddenly, without any reason at all, there was an instant feeling of intense fear that took over. There was nothing to be so fearful of, and no sounds or hints why suddenly I felt that way, so it was super confusing to me and made no sense until it did. Something didn't want me out there. I have no idea what it was, but I got the message and went inside. Once inside, the feeling washed away. Remembered I had smelled this outside at night a couple of years prior when getting up late to leave for work, so I was in a panicked rush to get on the road. I went from house to smelling into the driveway to starting the car in under 10 seconds. I must have put it in the back of my mind, but that makes twice that this has happened. I'll try again at 3 a.m. sometime and report back. And then he said, and I have just remembered that I did hear a sound. This really happened as I was walking back to the house. We have 2 tall trees in the back of our half-acre bordering on the neighbor's property, a 60-foot tall white pine that is still very alive, but has only huge torso-thick limbs at the top, and an equally tall ash that has fallen prey to the ash borer. This tree hasn't had leaves for 5 years, and it's long dead, but has small but very long limbs that start at about 8 feet up and cover the entire trunk, but they look like broomstick thickness compared to the pine tree next to it, which may explain the sound. It was still slightly raining, but only become an ice storm for the last hour or two, and there really wasn't enough ice accumulation on any branches to cause limb damage from excessive weight, No plants or shrubs or blades of grass were even sagging or leaning like they do in ice storms, very lightly coating them with ice. No wind either. So when turning back to the house, I hear a sizable, dry, single branch snap. Not a wood knock. For a second, I told myself, that makes sense, ice storm, weight-related occurrence, but immediately contradicted that with, I lost my spot here, immediately contradicted that thought with the realization that there wasn't enough ice on anything to naturally cause that. Then I thought it could have been a deer, but 8 to 9 feet up. I couldn't see past the SUVs at the driveway's end, and I didn't want to walk over to inspect it further, then slip on the ice on the slightly icy blacktop and bounce off either the car and set off the car alarm at 3 a.m. or wake up the entire neighborhood. Seeing nothing in the dark backyard from where I stood, I thought to myself, now was the time to go inside. That smell was powerful, strong the entire time, all the way to the door. The whole event happened in maybe a minute's time. That's it.
Okay.
So I don't know what to make of that. I mean, obviously, sulfur is one of the smells that Josh in the Brimstone Deceit associates very commonly with a lot of paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
I've definitely had that feeling like something didn't want me there, that oppressive sort of sense, so that, it makes sense to think the two are connected, but they don't have to be.
I think so. I mean, just that first thing that I was talking about a couple minutes ago, the idea of smell is one of the things that I have at least encountered the idea that it has an analogous sort of sense in the spirit or subtle realm. And so I would wonder if there is something that's there, if it could trigger that type of, and I don't know, again, the idea of sulfur and brimstone, that's Josh definitely would be the one, talking about why that specific smell. But the fear too, I mean, that's another concept that I've come across before is, really that one of the ways in which certain spirits can interact with people who are in physical bodies. And this is, I guess like disincarnate spirits, if you believe that, particularly of people who are, have had violent deaths or suicides, essentially that have karma unspent. That there are a lot of these spirits kind of around in the unseen environment that is all around us, and that you can kind of feel the emotions sometimes. It's like really like having a fly or a mosquito go by you. There's not any serious like damage being done or anything like that. It's very innocuous, but will get a rush if it's a really strong emotion from that spirit, that you'll essentially be feeling that. And I've often wondered that, because I've had the same feeling too, a fear feeling or a get out of here feeling or all of a sudden an anger feeling that comes on for no good reason in a particular place. Yeah.
Yeah, I've kind of had that too. There's that wonderful part, since we mentioned Mothman prophecies, where John Keel is, I'm trying to remember the particular setting, but he found he could walk, I think, down a portion of a road. And as soon as he made a particular step forward, he would feel like that oppressive fear.
I think that was
field of fear. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, he would be outside of it. It was almost like he walked into a field of it or something like that.
TNT area, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, all of that in context is really powerful. The limb snapping is also interesting too, because it adds a very physical aspect to that, because everything else is perception. Yeah. Of course, I suppose sound is a perception too, but there's something material attributed with that. And of course, I get the logic behind. It sounded like a branch that was too big for this little bit of ice to have caused to break.
Right. Yeah.
I definitely would have gotten the heck out of there real fast.
Yes. Yeah. Got a couple others here. These were all on different shows, but they were all interesting stories. He said, this is the second listen to the Where Did the Road Go with the Snake Brothers, from the Brothers of the Serpent. Two of my top 3 favorite shows. Sliding, as far as, knocking lights out and stuff. He said, after band practice, waiting for the train at the Northport station, LIRR, after 11 to 12 p.m., I'd be alone on the platform waiting with a guitar and gig bag, leaned against the platform hand railing. One night, I was just slowly meandering, waiting for the train. I walked under the lamppost with the light that had to be about 30 feet up, and it blinked out. I kept walking and it flickered back on. So I continued another dozen steps, turned around and went back to the platform. And as I got under the light, it blinked out and it turned back on after I passed a few steps. I really didn't think anything of it until I turned back and it did it a second time. So I decided to test it and waited an extra few minutes to see if it was shutting on and off like this on its own, and it didn't. So I saw the train light in the distance, and I waited another minute, then walked over to the light, and it frickin' shuts off, and then turns on as I walk away. I got on the train dismissing it. Another few times, waiting for that train, it happened, but then it stopped happening, so I assumed it was some other reason it was happening. Haven't been able to make it happen since, not that I've recognized anyway. Maybe it's selective, or it had to do with the proximity of the lamppost. Maybe the light bulb fixture has to be within a certain height, or my reflection was setting off the light sensor atop the lamp house that turns the lights on. Maybe a UFO was overhead and the aliens were messing with my head. Who knows? From now on, I'm going with aliens messing with me because everything is demons. He's right.
So it's demons. Yeah.
It's demons.
Everything is demons. Yeah.
It's obviously demons, yes.
But I mean, that makes sense. Like if it, like it not happening all the time, like when I have electrical stuff, it doesn't happen all the time. It's not like a constant nonstop thing. It's even when it was happening more obviously, it still wasn't all the time. Sometimes things were fine.
I think there are some people that have, maybe enough control over it that they really can make it happen. But I think for most people, it's, I think something's going on. I mean, I think there's some sort of interaction that's happening either the level that we don't really understand, that's beyond our understanding, or maybe at an just a electromagnetic field level in a way that we don't understand. Again, thinking of like there's more in terms of how we connect with things, electric universe, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think I really do like the idea that they come up with, or at least that they're proposing that all of these different factors could lead sort of, the everyday person like us to every once in a while for that to happen, even if we're not, we don't have sort of, and maybe this person does have sort of psychic abilities or psi abilities that have manifested with them. But, I think that you could, I feel like it's happened to me once or twice, or there's this weird, there's a lamppost that's just around the block from my house. And I'm pretty sure that it turns on or off if somebody's near it, because like the sensor's not working well because it's got like this giant hornet's nest that's growing into half of it, which is kind of cool looking in this weird macabre way. But it always turns on whenever I'm walking my dog next to it, and then it turns off or it does something weird. And I like to think that some subtle part of me is interacting with it, but it might just be something else.
It's also,
in my case.
I think in a lot of cases, this stuff probably happens to people and they just don't even notice.
I totally agree with that.
Light goes out, they don't think about it. Oh, the light just went out. They don't think, but it went back on after I walked away, and then they walk back to it and it goes out, because they don't do that because they're busy thinking about other stuff.
Yeah. There's a book called Magus of Java that's about I believe it's called Negong, which is just a different version of Qigong based on which country you're in and language and things like that. And the book is a little dubious. A lot of this guy's students contest what the other students say about him and things like that. And it was not written by the guy that it's about. It was written by one of his students. But they get a lot into like the way he moves chi. He has a positive and a negative, and it feels like electricity.
Yeah.
And supposedly there's videos of this even, but he would like light paper on fire by holding with both hands and things like that, because he was creating essentially a current would be how it was described, of electricity through it. And so the reason I bring that up and then is just to say that, obviously there's an electrical field with our body, and kind of adding on to what both of you have said about sometimes maybe you just get these things in the right paths that, you're turning these things on, you're turning them off. It has that sort of effect.
That's a good thing to point out, the idea, the chi. I mean, that's something that's been measured, that you can go and really see martial artists, and this is, anywhere, just look on YouTube, like the measurement of heat. You can get different monks or martial art, or monks who do practice martial arts, but you can see it to different degrees. And it's the chi is very much our ki, or whatever, however it's pronounced. something I very much experienced, even a little bit, and it's been a long time. I mean, I was a teenager the last time I did a martial art, but yeah.
Yeah, I assume that, when we talk about the kundalini energy and all of these things, that it's the same stuff. It's just a method of relating and manipulating it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, it's like, I think a good way to think of it, at least the way I think of it, is that like kundalini is like it's like the power station, and the transformer that's connecting you to maybe, the entire grid. But then the key or the chi that's going throughout your body, those are like the individual. They can be definitely used. It's all the same sort of pranic energy, for lack of a better term, which I know sounds very new age weird, but my personal, the way I kind of look at things at this point in my life, it does seem to be like there is some sort of fundamental energy that exists of some kind. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I agree. But real quick, I just want to throw this out here because it was curious to me. The opposite end of the spectrum, I think the History Channel did a show on like people that had unusual abilities and things like that. And they had a guy on there that was incredibly low conductive of electricity. And so things like grabbing, cords coming off of a car battery or something like that did not bother him at all. He did not conduct electricity through his body. So he was on the exact opposite end of it. And of course, the guy I think he was an electrician, and that's how he found this out.
That's great.
He was, so much less conductive than a normal person. And he's somebody else. I'm sure you could find him on YouTube, but you never hear about the people that aren't conductive, I suppose.
That's very cool. I love that.
Well, being an electrician is probably how he noticed, and most people may not even notice because they'll never be in that situation where, I should have gotten a bad shock there and didn't.
Exactly. All
right. Scott had one other story. This was about a frog fall. And he said, yep, it was exactly like the scenes in that movie Magnolia. After a weekend at a friend's wedding in Buffalo, Niagara Falls, I had dropped my girlfriend off back at Bennington College in Bennington, Vermont, around last light right after 8 p.m. in April 1987. Totally sober and driving back home to Long Island in my 1979 forest green Dodge Aspen station wagon, stereo on and rockin'. I chose the straightest route on the map to avoid any tolls or traffic and shot southwesterly through Vermont and was going to catch a road that led me to the Taconic Parkway. It must have been just before or after crossing into New York, not sure, but it was in the middle of nowhere. There were no streetlights or driveways or even lights in the distance, just a beautiful, dark, moonless, starry night. In the dark, about 10 p.m., heading down a long straight stretch of road, a very slow, granular downhill grade in elevation. The trees had ended abruptly and had opened up to a rolling, overgrown fields that had occasional 10-foot-tall trees here and there. Nothing around but the apparent valley straight ahead, and I was still driving gradually downhill at about 50 miles an hour. Then, ahead in my brights, I noticed one of those thin fog banks. Settled into the low spot ahead, I could see it stretches off to the left and right sides of the road and goes off into the distance. It looked super cool, like I was driving into a lake of dry ice fog across a stage. With my brights on and the radio cranking, it was even more cool. It was completely still. There was no wind disrupting this defined cloud bank ahead, or blanket ahead. Just in my mind, I knew that I'd be heading into the low spot of this valley and would soon be going uphill after I came out of this 100 to 200 yard fog bank. I brake in case of deer or anything, so I enter the fog, and now I'm seeing nothing but whiteness envelop me for a couple of seconds. And then I began to see the road again, and I'm driving under this thick fog. I was decelerating as the road leveled out, and I looked at the trippiness of the surroundings with this cloud that was now 10 to 15 feet above me like a ceiling. Radio still blasting. And incidentally, I love it when you drive under fog. It is so cool. Then I start to see what looks like leaves beginning to blow around, and they're even coming up the windshield. I can see the underside of this fog bank for another few hundred feet ahead of me, and see clearly what is that it is flat yet still pillowy and not being blown around by any wind. I think to myself, what the hell are these leaves? And the leaves become many leaves, and I notice I'm running over stuff. Damn, these are some mighty thick leaves. So I turned down the volume, only to be startled because now it sounds like Alex Van Halen is doing a drum solo all over my car. I brake to an abrupt stop as I realized that these leaves are frogs, pounding my roof over my head, slapping the windshield, bouncing off the hood in front of my eyes, bouncing back upwards a couple of feet. Frogs. The exact size of the frogs in the movie. Yes, full-grown frogs falling out of the sky through this blanket of fog stretched out all around me. I can only see what my lights are illuminating, so I can't see what is happening off to either side of the roadway and cannot get an idea to the extent of this absolute bizarre happening. I can see in my light's illumination that there are frogs dropping through the fog ceiling as far up in the road ahead of me, maybe 100 to 200 feet ahead in the distance. With this info flooding into my head and the incredible drum solo still pounding around me, I cracked open my window only an inch to add in the sound of slapping thuds of frogs hitting the blacktop in the empty lane to my left. It was steady, just deafening for about 15 seconds, then it slowly began to taper off. The whole thing lasted about half a minute or more until it stopped. I had already shut the engine off mid-drum solo. I opened the door, headlights still left on, and I get out to assess the damage. I had no camera, and cell phones weren't even invented yet. I walked around to the back of the car, and then up to the front and stood about 10 feet out in front of my car in the headlights and saw no damage. There I stood amongst the stunned, the dead, and the miraculously still alive frogs. I suppose the ones that landed off-road to the right and left had more of a chance. I could hear some of them sounding off. I had to step around the carnage, alone there in the sound of whatever frogs that survived the fall. There were frogs everywhere, about the size of my hand or larger. They were shiny green, brown, with markings, I'm sure, but I'm no herpetologist. I say shiny because they were not toads. They were dry-skinned. The road was completely dry. My mind is, of course, racing to explain this, and I'm talking to myself saying, this really happened and nobody is going to believe me. At first, I try to rationalize it that it had to be a tornadic event that emptied the residents of a local nearby lake, succinctly spitting them out, aimed with precision upon this one stretch of road. This, of course, made absolutely no sense. Just the frogs? Then where's the water and the fish? So then I'm thinking it must be a local college nearby, and they had a ton of frogs in a biolab, and I pictured a couple dozen stoned prankster students that were lying in wait with pails of frogs, saw me coming and began lobbing them skywards once some unsuspecting motorist had arrived. With the realization that this conclusion also made no sense, and I was alone on this road, the road of broken frogs. I was likely the only person for maybe miles in any direction. Not good. The paranormal alien thoughts came flooding into my head, and I got all spooked out. Not being able to see if a UFO was hiding right above me, beyond the white blanket ceiling, I got my butt back in the car. I looked at the road ahead that lay speckled and spackled with frogs in all states of consciousness and worse, and decided to GTFO right then and there. Sorry, froggies, but I got a long drive ahead. I apologize to my amphibian friends and hope I didn't squash any survivors, but thump, 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 and I was out of there. I still had to deal with the worst of it, but I was adrenalized for the tectonic, and that was a good thing. It wasn't until recently in my life that I heard of the Bennington Triangle, and this event definitely occurred within the triangular area that I see marked in all the Bennington Triangle online maps. And yes, I have told a bunch of people this story with all the same colorful detail and unwavering facts. My story doesn't change, and I don't think anyone has believed me still after 36 years. I mean,
that's a great, amazing story. I love the fog is, yeah. And
that's the interesting thing. I mean, obviously we had, whatchamacallit on, Travis Watson. Yeah. Talking about how many of these things involve fog. But I don't know if I've ever heard a story about like frogs and stuff coming out of fog.
No fog stories. No.
Yeah, this might be the first I've heard. Doesn't mean it hasn't happened. But I mean, and he hits one of the skeptic explanations there where it's like, oh, well, there was a mini twister that picked up a local lake. And it's like, but why just frogs?
Why just frogs when it's got the spout going? Yeah.
And he said everything was dry, so it didn't even come down with water,
Yep.
I mean, apports are, of course, a possibility of some sorts.
Who knows? It's sometimes I feel like these experiences, you just have to let them sit. and just be like almost in as like happenings that like a Zen koan. There's no way to, you just ponder it. It's the pondering itself that makes it worthwhile. It's cool that it was in the Bennington Triangle, though. That's an interesting area up there. That's in near Bennington, Vermont, and sort of it's up above Western Mass. But above sort of the Pioneer Valley area, which is the Lovecraftian area of Western Mass there.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure where that was, actually.
Yeah.
Interesting. Falls of things are definitely one of the weirder things that I think definitely do happen. I mean, there's been so many cases of it, so many document cases of it. And there isn't any good explanation. A glitch in the Matrix, perhaps.
Yeah, they're probably one of the more interesting things to me in the fact that nobody really disputes that these things happen. I mean, but you would think of something that would have science providing I don't want to call it a mundane explanation, but finding an explanation to explain what's going on with this, it would have happened by now.
Yeah.
And we don't have the answer for it. I just find it
the explanation is a water spout,
Yeah, but it's like, to your point, and what everybody brings up with that is, if it were a water spout, where's the other stuff that was in the water with it?
Yeah.
Where are the fish, whatever, bugs? Yeah.
And that's a whole lot. I mean, he's describing a lot of frogs, and that we have pictures of this type of stuff. Right. Frog falls and fish falls and stuff. And there's enormous amounts of them, more than you would get in a pond or anything like that.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. It was a cool story and it was well written.
Yeah. I could hear the drum solo from Hot for Teacher.
Okay, let's see. Which one was this? This is also related to the show I did with Watson. Be a Nice Putty Cat says, I had a terrifying experience that happened somewhere between Jasper and Banff in Canada. I ran a relay race, and after I wanted to trek out to the middle of nowhere by myself, of course, and I was about 5 or 6 hours from my car. I was in the tent that night, and basically, it's a long story, but I saw the largest, what I thought was a black wolf. That is until it howled, and at the same time, it rose up on its back legs and then just ran away. Trust me, I wish I never saw this thing because I have suffered greatly. PTSD, nightmares, and years of questioning everything I thought I knew. This happened in 2000.
Well, there you go. I mean, your it prompted you to question everything you know. That it has served its purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's a little glib to say it like that, but that's sort of how I look at it. Is those types of things. Even if they take the form of something familiar that someone has shared, it's more about what it did for you. And it's great that it sent you on that path.
Yeah. And I think, and this stuff generally does do that. No matter, which variation of things it is. That's why it seems to happen in liminal time periods. It could, as Jacques Vallee suggests, be a control system. But
I was just going to say that. Yeah. I mean, that's one way to think about it. Or, I guess any way that I'm sort of posing it as a control system, if you think about it as something that is trying to push you in a particular direction that has a agency to it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It doesn't have to be a negative thing.
No, it doesn't have to be a negative thing.
And I think questioning everything is a very good path to take. Just in general.
Yeah.
I'll have to do some research on where they were at in Canada. They point out Jasper there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that would be interesting to look at, like, any of the indigenous beliefs about the area and see if there's anything that there's a connection there. There may not be, but it's always, I think it's worth looking into those things, especially when you get to places that had more wilderness for a long time and things like that.
I don't know if Travis and I got into it when he was on the 2-part show. I mean, his book I would really just wanted to talk to him about the entire book, but we only have so much time. Plus, you should just go read the book because it's really good. But he did talk about some of the native beliefs in that area, and most of them have beliefs regarding these giant wolves and things like that. They're fully aware of them, and they tend to stay clear of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that may be like Algonquin. Is that right?
I don't know.
Okay. Interesting.
That's cool.
All right, so let's see. This next one, anonymously. I wanted to share a couple stories that most of my life I felt I needed to keep private. For many years, I had experiences with beings that were typically referred to as grays. The bulk of these experiences occurred between the ages of 8 and 13. For most of those years, I hadn't considered them to be aliens, but instead demons. While I don't believe I have ever been abducted, or hope I have not, I did experience dozens of interactions in which I was questioned, threatened, and had them demand I go with them of my own free will. I never fully experienced sleep paralysis. On many occasions, I would wake feeling like, there's a word missing, like I'm guessing body didn't want to move in the presence of the other, but was always able to wiggle my limbs until I would gather control. This would be followed by immediately hiding under the covers as if that was some sort of protection. I spent many nights calling out for my parents or siblings to rescue me. I never worked, and the visitors assured me that no one would come from. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me redo that. Words are hard sometimes. This never worked, calling out for help, and the visitors assured me that no one would come for me. I absolutely prayed on multiple occasions, and the beings seemed insulted by this. My mother is religious, and I had attended a religious school. I believed that for some reason I deserved this. It's fair to say that after a stretch of regular visitations that I felt absolutely broken. My parents and siblings didn't believe that it was happening. Despite being told otherwise, I was convinced these weren't dreams. The terror and certainty of these events caused me to create defensive plans of action. On several occasions, I slept with flashlights that would inexplicably refuse to function in their presence. I slept a few times with a baseball bat under my blanket, but felt too much fear to leave my bed and use it. Despite it being hidden, they acknowledged its presence. One day, playing with my father's duct tape, I planned a trap for them. I cut several strips of tape and attached one end to my ceiling fan. With the other end, I attached several large Duplo blocks. I don't know what Duplo blocks are.
They're like big Lego blocks.
Giant Legos.
Oh, okay. I tested it out, and sure enough, they were flung about the room violently. I went to bed and reset my trap. I tied a string to my closed bedroom door, wove it through some shelves, and tied the other end to the light switch for the fan. I awoke to the door opening over the night, but neither the fan nor the light turned on. A presence stayed in the doorway. I retreated under the covers, and some time passed before the fan sprang to life, harmlessly unloading its payload. I think I attempted this another time and succeeded in pelting my father. I have a little doubt about the order of these two attempts. Later, I started keeping a tennis ball at the ready under my blanket. I played baseball regularly in my youth, and I felt that I could harm one of these beings. Eventually, I awoke one night and had my chance. A being was standing in my doorway about 10 feet from me. I stood up on the end of my bed, and my throw was right on target. Unfortunately, the ball never hit. A couple of feet in front of the being's head, the ball stopped in midair. The ball hung in place for a moment and then reversed its path and struck me in the forehead. I returned to the safety of my blankets and recalled nothing else of this night. The next morning was its own experience. On a previous occasion, I had felt like I could briefly read my mother's mind the morning after an experience. The morning following this event with the tennis ball was similar. That morning, having felt something of a telekinetic attack, I focused on my bathroom mirror. For about an hour, I seemed to be able to open and close the mirrored cabinet. Later in the day, I found this impossible to replicate. In the years following, I wondered greatly about that morning. Had this been possible during the sort of afterglow of the encounter? There were many more experiences, but never anything of that post-experience feeling. I have often wondered it being in the fight or flight mode might make someone more receptive to psychic abilities, or if this could explain some of the unusual poltergeist-like phenomena that sometimes accompany contact experiences. So as for that last bit, absolutely, because you're generating energy, and everyone has the potential to create psychokinetic energy, but some people do it easier than others, and it seems like people who are having unusual experiences are more likely to generate PK energy, which can create poltergeist effects.
Yeah. So what's interesting to me about this is the amount of terror that whatever these entities were causing him.
Yeah.
Because, like the flashlight made me think about this immediately. The flashlight's not going to hurt them, but they made sure that he knew that it didn't matter. And then you see this sort of escalating over his experiences of, he would be paralyzed, but then they, assuming they could control this at any time, let him have the opportunity to throw the tennis ball at them and then have it, fly back at him. All of these things are terrorizing tactics.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting to me and makes it extra creepy for me because it's just showing you that all of this doesn't matter, that we're going to be able to do what we want when we want. Like the presence in the doorway and the duct tape trap never working for him. That's not something that would stop anybody, but we're going to let you know we're here and we're going to loom and let this fear drive up in you, and then go away. I totally get the read of this as more of a demonic experience, and it reminds me a lot of people that have talk about experiences with like shadow people terrorizing them. To be honest, that just happen to look more like a gray in this.
And they said that their mom was religious too, which I'm sure influenced.
That's a good point.
Kid's worldview,
and he attended a religious school.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if it was. Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the abduction experience. I don't think it was Travis Walton. But the person temporarily got free and either kicked or punched one of the entities.
I think Travis did.
Okay, and it kind of looked at him and was like, "Why did you do that?"
Yeah.
And so. That seemed like a very physical experience. And a lot of these seem more, that line between physical reality and the astral body or however we want to categorize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, the amount of fear really sucks. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It really doesn't sound. Sounds horrible.
And of course, not having anyone believe you doesn't make it help. It isn't helpful.
Right. And with some of the experiences that people have with grays or things that look like grays, things we call grays, it's more mechanical. It's not that they're trying to be careful. It's just efficient in a way. But the amount invested in the theater of frightening him is unsettling.
Yeah. But not unheard of.
Yeah.
Not unheard of. No.
That's something that I always, I wonder about when you're talking about these different experiences. Like people have these, that's been the question of the abductee phenomenon forever. Is you have these people that have angelic, type spiritual experiences, and then these people that are having these. Horrific experiences that are utilizing what seems, like human torture. It's really perplexing.
Yeah. So I wanted to read this after the frog fall story, and I totally forgot. But a story I clipped that just happened recently. Mysterious worm rain hits Beijing, China. Worms fell from the sky on Beijing, China, covering streets and vehicles with no official explanation from the Chinese authorities. Hypotheses include a full worm moon phenomena. I don't know what that means. Or the possibility that the worms were actually popular flowers. So one of the explanations... okay, here we go. One of the hypotheses raised by users suggests that the rain could be a consequence of a phenomenon called full worm moon, which was supposed to occur on Tuesday, the day and last full moon of winter in the Northern Hemisphere. This event is so named because in some of the countries in the Northern Hemisphere, it is the period where the soil begins to thaw and worms begin to appear. Another supposition is that the worms are actually popular flowers that have a caterpillar-like shape and are common in the region. Due to the rain, the leaves may have fallen from the trees and become stuck to the cars, making them look like worms. Yeah. So... it's like saying rocks don't fall from the sky. That was already there and it got struck by lightning. I'm pretty sure if people are seeing and there's video of this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. If this didn't happen like hundreds and hundreds of years ago and we have no way to corroborate it, it was either worms or it wasn't, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll just change what it is. No, it was seeds. Yes, because apparently people in Beijing are stupid and can't tell the difference between seeds and worms.
Yeah.
Popular flowers and seeds and worms at that too.
Yeah. So, I mean, that I saw that this week, and I'm like, well, here's an interesting example of let's just ignore this, event and call it something it's not.
I mean, that seems to be the way of, the government that runs that country. So,
Well, but scientists here would have done the same thing.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
I don't even think the government.
No, I just mean whoever's in charge is,
Yeah.
Like it was an authority figure who came up with that, response.
And so there again, you have something that and you see these things all over the cars and stuff, and it's like, so they crawled out of the ground and then up onto people's cars and buildings.
Worm moon.
Worm moon. Well,
it would be interesting. I'll have to look up this. You have silkworms that will blow around in the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you wonder if you end up with this, cycle combined with a species, reproduction or a certain period in their life cycle of worm. I don't know. But, it's like maybe we don't know the history of this holiday either. And if it actually lined up with when it was originally celebrated or marked on a calendar, when this particular event actually happens, and it finally did. I don't know. There's a lot there that makes me think that this is probably worms.
Yes. All right. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Quick break here before we resume our conversation. And I want to send a special thanks out to Michael Fritsch. I'm sure I'm not saying that right. Fritsch, who has buried me in books from my Amazon wish list, which was absolutely awesome of him. And eventually I'm going to get around to making a video of the things people had sent me and thanking everyone, just like everything else, it's behind. But he really went above and beyond, digging back in time to find the Amazon wish list and ordering me a bunch of really cool stuff, which will hopefully reflect on the show in the future. All right. If you want to mail me anything, you could do that at P.O. Box 444, Ovid, New York. That's OVID, New York, 14521. All other contact info is at wheredidtheroadgo.com. The main email is contact@wheredidtheroadgo.com. If you have a story you would like for a future listener story show, you'd like to submit that, it's stories@wheredidtheroadgo.com. And there's links to all our social media there. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Discord, YouTube, everything you can find at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And if you want to check out my metal show, if you're into underground music, not mainstream type of stuff, and you want to discover some new bands, you can find that at www.thelastexit.org. All right, now for the recommendation for this week. I'm going to go with The Call of the Void. And I really enjoyed this. It's a complete podcast. It had 3 seasons, and, it finished, so you're not going to be left on a cliffhanger like so many things. I feel like podcasts really shouldn't do that to people, but it happens a lot. At least record something to close it off. Yeah. But yeah, Call of the Void, really fun, interesting fiction, audio drama. I don't really want to explain it because you should just try it out and see if you like it. It's dark, it's original, and again, I really enjoyed it. It's very well done. So check it out if you're looking for something new to listen to. And now, back to our conversation. You're listening to Where Did the Road Go? And I'm here with Christopher Ernst and Super-Inframan.
Hello.
Hello.
And we're mostly doing listener stories. And this one I just labeled Premonitions. Let's see what this one is. I have 2 stories to share, one short and one long. I'd appreciate your thoughts on these, especially if you've heard anything similar before. I'll start with the shorter one. I can't remember exactly when this happened. It would have been sometime around 2018. I was living in an apartment in the area of Sydney called Inner West. The apartment itself was fine, certainly not haunted, and nothing spooky or unnerving about it. But while living there, I did experience a few strange things, all of them either on the cusp of sleeping or waking. Before I go further, I should point out that I'm not on any medication and am a social drinker at best. I don't take any drugs. One night, something woke me. I opened my eyes, and floating in the air a few feet above my bed was what I can only describe as a sort of mandala-like image superimposed on the dark. I lay wide awake, staring at this thing. It appeared fixed, which is to say it didn't move. At one point, I turned away and looked back. It did not track with my vision. It was square-shaped, but comprised of four smaller squares, each one holding an image that resembled the style depicted in old woodcuts. I remember looking at each individual square in an anti-clockwise direction, top left first, then bottom left, bottom right, etc. Each image was highly detailed, but totally unfamiliar, and I can't remember anything of them now. However, when I finally looked at the top right square, I knew exactly what it was. This image showed a wild-looking man standing hunched in three-quarter profile. He had very long, unkempt hair that fell down about his big shoulders, as well as a thick-looking beard that hung past his waist. His arms were ropey and strong-looking. From the waist down, he had the legs and hooves of a goat. Immediately, a single thought ran through my mind. Oh, that's Pan. The realization was so casual, so clear and resounding, that it felt almost unconnected to what I was seeing. Here was this weird floating image that was otherworldly and strange, yet I wasn't scared or even mildly alarmed. All I thought was, oh, yeah, Pan. At which point I rolled over, closed my eyes, and fell straight back to sleep. It definitely wasn't a dream. I suppose it could be a hypnagogic hallucination, although I've seen nothing remotely like it in my life, and I'm usually a very sound sleeper. I had no dreams about Pan that night, nor have I since. The other thing, at the time, and even now, I knew very little about Pan, except how he's usually depicted, half animal, often carrying an instrument. In the image, he had, in fact, been holding something in his hands. I want to say it was a pan flute or something similar, but in truth, I didn't absorb that particular detail, and I would only be guessing. Afterwards, I searched online for images of Pan as depicted in old woodcuts, but found nothing remotely similar to what I'd seen. The whole thing lasted not even 10 seconds, but it was incredibly vivid and detailed. As for the size of the whole image, 4 squares combined, it was probably similar in size to a movie poster, but I had no posters or anything hanging on my walls. The level of detail depicted in each smaller image seemed far more intricate than I would have expected given the overall size. That's also something that stood out. I'm afraid I couldn't describe the color either. It was sort of sepia-toned, but that's not doing it justice. Its overall effect reminded me of a photo negative, though, again, a poor comparison. For what it's worth, during that time in my life, I had a number of things happening, work, bad relationships, etc., that were either in the process of falling apart or soon would. I was also living right next to a busy trail line, an obvious symbol for liminality, I guess. Though what Pan has to do with any of this, I'd love to know.
I mean, I kind of wonder in situations like this if it isn't that, the goal was for this person to think of and look at Pan, So there's this really small thing, and Pan was this very small, or you said this very short experience that happened, and a very small, a detailed woodcut type thing, as you said too. But then what came out of that is that you went and you did all this research. So what does that mean to you? Is what I would say. Like that. I mean, it to me really strongly feels like, okay, so Pan wanted you to think about it. Him. Yeah. Pan wanted you to focus on him. And something, I don't know, some relationship has been formed from that. That's how I would interpret it, I don't know. I guess I feel like when you see, images of things that are really these strong archetypes, like, gods, that's like the closest thing, if not the thing that you have to experience. So that is it. I mean, maybe that's the experience. So that is Pan. So what else can it be? It's either that or we don't believe in any of this, so that's cool. Yeah, no, it's a very unique experience too. And even if it's hypnagogic, that doesn't mean it doesn't have meaning to it. Yeah. Any thoughts, Saxon?
I'm trying to think hard for some kind of insight that would really add to any of this, but what I keep going back to is just how casually and how common it is for people to have a weird experience like this and then just turn over and go back to sleep. But I think building off what Chris said too, because you had the idea that it was a mandala, but you don't remember the other parts of it. I think that adds weight to you were supposed to focus on Pan here.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yes, Chris, and yes.
Yeah.
Maybe Pan is your guardian spirit.
Right.
All right. So the second story he has here. Because I'm lazy. Okay, no, let me take that back. He posted this on Reddit initially. And he said he's basically rewritten the Reddit post a little bit here. This happened sometime between 2012 and 2014. I would have been in my late 20s then, living in a shared house in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. I was going to university during the day, then working nights packing shelves in a supermarket. After each shift, I'd catch the bus home around 11 p.m., get off at the top of the hill near the shops, then walk down toward home. It was about a 10-minute walk through a very quiet, well-to-do suburban neighborhood. At that time of night, I almost never saw any people, and I just tapped the screen and completely lost everything. Hang on. There we are. The walk took me past a big cemetery. Up on the headland, but there was nothing eerie about it. In fact, Waverly Cemetery, look it up, is a beautiful, well-tended place full of interesting old markers and statues. It's bordered by a sandstone wall that follows the way downhill, then left along this coastal road that sort of loops back around. I mention these details because I probably caught that bus and made that same journey about 1,000 times, and this was the only time anything even remotely odd happened. One night, I was walking home, maybe halfway down the hill, when a plain white van drove past on my left. I watched the taillights grow small, sweeping left as it took the bend at the bottom of the hill. As soon as it disappeared, a feeling came over me that I was going to see it again. Not sure how else to describe this. It wasn't a voice in my head or anything, just a fleeting impression that when I got to the bottom of the hill, that same white van would be waiting for me. I kept walking, and when I got to the bottom and turned left, sure enough, there was a pair of headlights on the road coming back toward me. They were too far away to know if it was the same car, but instinctively I knew it was. I felt no trepidation, but again my heart knew that whatever was about to happen was going to happen whether I wanted it to or not. I must stress, I never get feelings or premonitions like that. I couldn't predict what I'm eating for lunch tomorrow. It was weird to me even then, but I didn't have time to think about it. The van slowed and came to a stop at the side of the road. There was a young guy driving. He leaned across and called for me to come over. I figured he probably needed directions. But as I approached, I immediately began to feel very uneasy. The gentle impression I'd felt watching the van drive past now solidified into a vague feeling of dread. I stood on the grassy verge, then stopped. I remember the radio in the car was playing some random pop song. I don't remember too much of what the driver looked like, except that maybe he was about my age or a little older, had long blonde hair, a few days' growth on his face. He certainly didn't strike me as threatening, so the unease I felt was more confusing at first. He spoke with a British accent. I just assumed he was a traveler. "Excuse me," he said. "Do you know where I can find the cemetery?" Now, I was really confused. He would have seen it while he drove the road moments before. In fact, he'd driven down to the far end of the road, made a U-turn to come back. That's when I'd seen the headlights. At the other end, where the road loops around, the wall wasn't high. You could clearly see all the graves, even in the dark, stretching back up the hill. It made no sense. I was about to answer when my blood ran cold. Somewhere in the back of the van, I could clearly hear a woman screaming and crying for help. "Help me, please, somebody help me." She kept saying this over and over, and I could hear her banging against the inside paneling. It wasn't a recording, and it wasn't the radio, and I could hear clearly above the driver's voice and the music playing. I looked at the driver, and he just stared at me and said nothing, making no effort to explain the screams or even acknowledge that he could hear them. "Sorry," I said, I've no idea. That was all I could get out. He nodded, said thanks anyway, and drove off. The rest of the way home, I ran the rest of the way home. My flatmates were asleep, so I went straight to my room. Had there been even 1% doubt in my mind, I probably would have woken someone and at least told them what happened. Instead, I called the police. They took it very seriously, took down all my details. They said they'd send a car to look for the van. Unfortunately, I hadn't seen the license plate. In the moment, I hadn't thought to even check, and my description of the driver wasn't much more detailed than what I've described now. In the weeks that followed, the police never called back to follow up, although I watched the news like a hawk. Nothing ever appeared regarding any abduction. To give some context, if a young woman was abducted in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, it would make national news for weeks, possibly months. All cities have crime, but that part of Sydney is a rather affluent and considered very safe. On the few occasions I've shared this story, the reaction I usually get is, "Oh, my, so do you think the driver was a serial killer?" Let me stress, no, I don't think that at all. I never have. Other than this weird question about the cemetery, he seemed friendly. As far as I'm concerned, he was just a guy asking for directions. Why would he want to find a cemetery in the middle of the night? Waverly Cemetery is on a headland overlooking the ocean. There are good surfing beaches within walking distance. It's part of a popular part of Sydney for travelers. Yes, it's a big sprawling cemetery, clearly visible from the road, but not being from the area, and as it happened that night, maybe he missed it somehow. I don't know. Could have been a prank then, maybe, but it certainly wasn't staged like a prank. The whole encounter, from when the van pulled over to me approaching, lasting probably less than 20 seconds, during that whole time, the driver made no indication he could hear the woman, nor did he attempt any showmanship or try to draw the moments out. When this happened, I was very shaken, and my brain still to this day is trying to make sense of the weirder parts I experienced. The woman's voice had sounded strange. It's hard to put into words, and if I sound hesitant, it's because I don't want to seem like I'm creating something paranormal out of an otherwise mundane, albeit creepy encounter. I know adrenaline and fear can make wind sound like a howling animal and shadows appear as monsters, but this wasn't that. All I can say is that I know I heard a woman screaming and pleading for help, but I'm not sure how I heard it. It felt like it was coming from the back of the van, but there was also an odd quality to it that felt directionless, if that makes sense. Frankly, it sounded a bit like someone yelling underwater, far away and muffled, but I had no trouble making out what it said. Help me, please, someone help. It was both clear and unclear, and I don't know how else to put that. The part that stayed with me the most is how I felt right before it happened. When the van initially drove past, I had no reason to think anything strange was about to occur. Yet, as I turned the corner and saw those headlights, I just knew that whatever was about to play out could now not be undone. I've thought about that a lot over the years, and I don't actually believe there was anyone screaming for help in the back of the van that night. But I swear on my life that is what I heard, and that it was a woman screaming and crying for help. I actually don't think the driver could hear it at all, but what it means, I really don't know.
Oh, it sounds really creepy.
Yes.
I mean, maybe it was, maybe it was the van in the future or in the past that happened in the van. I don't know.
Oh.
Or some kind of like psychic energy reaching out to him. I don't know. People that do horrible things to other people are, there's a fetishistic quality to it too. So, I still wouldn't put it past someone that, pulled up to ask a question, just knowing that he could hear that and never batting an eye that it was strange, but just for the thrill of it.
Yeah.
And it's really unsettling.
Yeah, agreed. And the question about the cemetery when it's obviously right there.
Right. I mean, it's a lot of things that are converging together to make it particularly weird.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very weird. I feel like if this guy was trying to lure him into the van in some way, he would have put a little more effort into it.
Yeah.
He said it only lasted a few seconds. Where's the cemetery? Don't know. Okay.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't like, can you come up to the van a little closer? I can't hear you or anything like that. I don't know. Maybe, and the weird sense of the woman screaming. I mean, maybe that was part of the fight or flight thing,
Yeah.
Like it's, he did hear it and it freaked him out enough that it now doesn't seem like it was real.
Right.
And like you said, maybe the guy wanted him to hear it. Maybe that was part of the thrill. But again, why wouldn't that have shown up on the news somewhere?
Maybe he's really good at disappearing people.
Maybe. Well, yeah, but you'd think someone would come up as missing.
Depends if they were homeless or something else like that, unfortunately.
That is true. That's a very good point.
Yeah, if you don't know a person is, if you don't count them around, you don't know when they're missing either, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. It could have been a very affluent area, but I'm sure there's plenty of people who are the unnoticed workers who maintain the affluence that are in that area.
Unfortunate, but true. And as far as the premonition part, I mean, it seems like it had an impact on him, regardless of what it was, which would make, and those are the type of events that seem to send information backward in time, especially when he's saying it felt like it was supposed to happen, essentially.
Right. Closing that loop. Yeah.
So I don't know what else to say about that one. It's a very strange story.
Right.
Yeah, that's intense. That was very intense.
All right. I have a couple of short ones here we're going to get to because we're almost out of time. This one's very short from Vanessa Kindle. I saw a ghost while driving a few years ago. My description after it happened was as follows. And this was from November 18th, 2021. I just saw a ghost. It was just this weird ball of vapor until it got near me, and I saw it was a cat ghost. It crossed the street in front of me, and right when it got to the other side of the road, it faded out and vanished.
Perfect.
Yeah. I saw a tumbleweed of lights that did that on my driveway. Pulled into my driveway, and on the right side of the driveway, it looked like a bunch of sparklers in a tumbleweed. It just kind of lit up. It rolled across the driveway, got to the other side, and went out. And I mean, I was going to say, it's not like if you take animals and stuff, they don't really make a designation on roads and stuff so much. So, like, why would a ball of light only roll across the driveway?
Right. I will say, I don't trust cats, so I wouldn't put it past a cat turning into a ball of light either.
Why don't you trust cats?
I mean, just based on my experience with the one that lives with me.
Ah, I see. I mean, they're evil, but they're also adorable.
They are.
What was the other short one I had there? This one from Linda Weaver. Today, as I do every Friday, this was a few weeks ago, mind you, I waited for the bus at my stop. Keeping in mind this is an urban environment with a farm ranch area. This is Texas. As I am waiting, I hear what I would call wood knocks. There is a tree behind me, but, well, it is an urban environment. I scan the area. There's a bar behind the tree, but there is only one person out there cleaning, and the tabletops are glass, not wood. And honestly, it sounds to me like it's coming from the tree. I decide maybe I have just misheard, turn back to wait for the bus, and it happens again. Unmistakably wood. This time I decide to visibly ignore it, and it stops after that. I do not know how such a sound could have happened, and I'm aware of the woods poltergeist theory, so I just wanted to register this in case other people have experienced it. I mean, yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, in an urban area, there's so many things that could cause a knock, but that kind of distinctive wood knock, I wouldn't think there's a lot of things that would cause that.
I wouldn't think so either, but I mean, there's so many weird things in the city. But I've never heard a wood knock either.
Fair.
Not me either. I was just trying to think about like sounds that might make me think of a wood knock in the city versus, when you're out in the country, there's all kinds of weird sounds too. But I've never heard a wood knock to have that point of reference.
Yeah.
We were in New York City last week, and I heard all kinds of crazy things outside the window overnight, but nothing that made me think about like, a tree limb or a tree branch hitting a trunk or anything.
So, I mean, it could have been, I mean, if you're thinking of it as poltergeist activity, it certainly could have been.
Yeah.
Well, in that case too, it doesn't need it to be physical. It's.
Yeah. So, let's see. Do I have anything else we could squeeze in here? This one. Yeah. This will probably be the last one for tonight. It's from James. Some weird things have been happening lately that as of a few days ago, I don't know what to make of really, but maybe it'll interest you. February was a really bad month for my family. My dad fell and broke his arm. My aunt, my father's sister, is gravely ill, and the family dog also had been ill for several weeks until he finally reached the point where my father had to have him put to sleep, and my father's truck had to be put in the shop for expensive repairs, something that really stressed him out on top of everything else. Well, last Friday, my father's truck was finally fixed and available for him to pick up, and he had to walk to the mechanic's shop to retrieve it. On the hike, he noticed something lying in the grass near the street, and as he got closer, it realized it was an owl. A very rare sight, although I'm pretty sure there are owls where we live. The owl was dead, lying on its back like it had just dropped dead from a heart attack. No gore, no decomposition, no loose feathers around, no sign of violence or cause of death. When he got home, naturally he told my siblings and I about it, and we thought it was strange. Then, that Saturday night, my brother had a very strange dream. He dreamt that there were gnome-like fairies outside my bedroom window in the bushes. They said something to him, which he couldn't remember exactly, but he did have the distinct impression they were mocking him, relating to the fact that nobody would believe he had actually seen fairies. His dream then trailed off into other things. Now, admittedly, him and I had talked about fairy folklore, particularly in its relationship to the UFO phenomenon, so that very easily could have been a factor. The morning after we noticed mushrooms were now growing in the yard outside that same window, though admittedly this is not entirely unheard of. So there it is. What do you guys think? Have I been listening to too many podcasts? And before you ask, yes, I have sent this story to Mike Cleland.
Perfect.
I mean, it seems like very synchronistic stuff going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, if like you were living, I don't know, 200 years ago, that would have been like omens aplenty for you to do something. What? I have no idea.
Right. I mean,
maybe put out food for the good people. I don't know. An offering.
And we've talked about this before, like they found mushrooms outside the window after that dream.
Yeah.
And mushrooms,
that's great. I love that.
It may not be a weird thing, but the synchronicity of them being there right after the dream makes it interesting. Like not everything that is like spiritually meaningful is going to be paranormal.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think that's a key thing for people to, for me at least, I would say it has been helpful for me, or it's been something that I, when I started thinking this way, it helped things flow in a better way, is to not have there be a delineation between something that is like spiritual or non. It's all like essentially a gradient, and it's all interpenetrating and working together.
Yes.
So I feel like, and one isn't more important than the other. It's really all sort of how you engage with it. So physical synchronistic, phenomena like this that don't have any sort of supernatural bent or miraculous bent to them, I don't think it means it's any less important or less anything. Not that anybody was saying that, but for me at least, it's important to kind of think in that way, that everything's working it's all around us and it's all working together.
Yes. Yeah, it's not, this is the normal stuff, this is the paranormal stuff, and only the paranormal stuff holds any real meaning, or it's all one thing, kind of flowing together.
The stuff all works in unison, and I think we've talked about this on the show sometimes too, where you can find yourself playing the synchronistic or the paranormal role for somebody. The magical moment, which for you is a mundane thing, but for somebody else, you're there and say the right thing at exactly the right time. And you might be like, oh, well, this, is something I do on Tuesdays. And, they needed something to happen on Tuesday that you happen to be in place for.
Yep.
You just never know. And I always think that's a good way to come back to how these magical things happen in a more material environment.
I feel almost like magical things and supernatural things are like the last resort. And that if you are going to talk about it in terms of a control system, then I feel like it's the everyday things that we just don't notice. That's the everyday business that's happening, in terms of, maybe just the control system being, permanently embedded in how reality works. I don't know. And that it's almost like, all right, it's the nuclear option.
Yes. There's this wonderful episode of Futurama where they may or may not meet God, the creator. And the episode ends with him kind of like the creator circling back around to a comment he made earlier about like, when you do everything right, nobody notices anything at all.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're out of time. And hey, Saxon, where do you usually hang out online?
Super-Inframan is on Instagram, and I do have a Mastodon account. I've not used it as much, and I hang around the Discord a little bit too for Where Did the Road Go?
And Chris, where can people find you?
You can find me if you need to message me through brightrectangle.com, and my films are over there, or Trauma or Amazon Prime. You can find them there too.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment here to thank all of my patrons, because all of you help make this show possible. And I want to give a special shout out to those of you pledging $10 or more. Illuminati, Chuck Shutters, Leanne Cherry, Matt in Delaware, Allison Cook, Super-Inframan, Indrid Cold, 36 Dingo, CJ, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Christine, a blue second gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Guy Quinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Ann Wintowski, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Chris, Craig Cicernos, Craig Parmenter, Diane B., MTK, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullet, Russ Rouse, James Lattimore, James Lindsay, Jim and Sophie, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Lauren McLean, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, MJ Armstrong, Mark Brady, Mr. Weird, Oli Andre Olar, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Seed Person 1, Stacy Sherwood, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Gebhard, Craig Sagastumi, Will Powell, Ren Collier, and Caroline Walker. Thank you all so very, very much. There is a Patreon segment to go along with this. If you want to become a patron and help support the show, go to wheredidtheroadgo.com, click on the big Patreon link, and there is a Substack coming as well. And for $3 a month, you'll get extra content almost every week, sometimes more than once, plus shows a week early, and other special gifts here and there. I want to welcome Russ Rouse as a new Patreon this month. Thank you, Russ. And of course, a shout out to Vincent Trewell, who does our recaps, has his own podcast, and a book you can check out on Amazon. I'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.